if Derek doesn't turn up, we'll probably just have to read from his bloody book. So shall we start with the first paragraph? Right, and unfortunately, the first paragraph is by the great Hugo himself, and it says, "This book clearly and conclusively shows the incompatibility between the capitalist system and the protection of the environment. The capitulation of many Green parties to capitalism has converted them into anti-ecologists." I'll drink to that, Hugo. We still don't have a speaker, except Jane, who was going to finish off with a contribution from... she's translating an important work of eco-socialism written by a Belgian writer, which hasn't come out in English yet. Jane hasn't managed to finish it yet, but she has made a start, and she was going to give us some offerings. And you were expecting to do that at the end,
yes,
I know.
I mean, because Derek was going to introduce, and then I was going to sort of conclude, you know, but I mean because the thing is, I've only translated the introduction. That was my intention, to translate the introduction, and I don't know how many of you actually speak French. You see, otherwise, you know, because otherwise I could read out a few more paragraphs. But right, hands up anybody who does speak French. Right.
Well, either that, or we could just buy some references.
Why don't we do an introduction?
I'm sure.
Could I just quickly say, I mean, I don't know what the meeting's about, but a couple of conferences ago we had a fringe when it was called something very similar, and there was a huge discussion about this, and I think that meeting got confused between business and capitalism. Right. And there were people saying, we've got to have businesses and we've got to be efficient and so on, and we need a profit motive to do that. And then it sort of got intertwined with capitalism, and I think that's something I would like to see drawn apart, in that we need to have efficient businesses, but they don't need to be ever-growing capitalist, etc. And I think that's something that the previous meeting, I think it was 2 conferences ago, it somehow missed the point. And I don't know what your...
No, I mean, all I'd say is that we've certainly got a lot to cover in an hour. Rather than wait for Derek, Jonathan, Essex, Green Councillor in Surrey, is going to kick off. He was going to be following Derek, who was going to introduce it, but we can do it the other way around. Over to you, Jonathan.
Okay, thanks. What I was going to say start with was, is anyone aware of Mark Linus?
Yes.
Definitely agree. Wonder if he's gone capitalist. He's written a recent book called God's Species. And God's Species, basically, the way I see it, I'll read his book backwards. He's the special government advisor for the Maldives at international climate negotiations. And he was at Copenhagen when the final deal was done between China and America. And I think he's basically, at that point, he gave up hope of politics changing, and he seems to give the impression in his book that he's given up the hope of behaviour change and culture change happening, and therefore he doesn't see any possibility that economics can change. So then he writes a book which follows his very well written 6 Degrees, Messages from a Warming World, which was very much something which was quite effective in killing a lot of climate deniers off in terms of their story. And he writes basically and argues that, well, we still need to respond to the green issues, but we just need to respond on the form of technology. So he basically then sets out how we need to have carbon offsetting and focus on the cheapest things first, wherever they happen to be. We should focus on GM foods as a way of increasing food productivity and nuclear power. But if you were to read his book, I think many of you may reach the same conclusion as me, which is that technology really doesn't give you enough. And an example I would give you is our campaigning in Surrey, where the best environmental technical option for dealing with residual waste from our households is currently to build an incinerator. And the current economics of that is you subsidise that with PFI money when you build it, then you subsidise it with renewable obligation certificate money when you run it. And the economics gives you a technical solution which just keeps things going as they are, fairly centralised, separating the technology from any possibility of behaviour change, and reinforcing current economics and current politics as the way forward. And I'd say a better approach to this is that set out by Heather Rogers in a book called Green Gone Wrong, which I first came across on Derek's website. Excellent green blog. And what she does is sets about some of the flaws in some of the so-called green approaches which have gone wrong recently, like the idea that we can use biofuels as a substitute for petrol and produce a globalised economy which exports what used to be food from one country and then puts it in cars in that or a different country, or cuts down rainforests. Another example is closer to home. I work for a company called, or a charity, called Bioregional, which has a joint venture company with Quintain, which is a FTSE 100 house builder. And after building BedZ, which is where I work, which was set out as to be a zero energy development in use, the aim was then, how do you then replicate that? And originally Ken Livingstone was going to do that politically and was going to put one of these in every London borough, but that kind of didn't happen. So we thought, right, well, let's do it anyway, because we really urgently want to do this. So a joint venture with Quintain, bid to do one in East London, hasn't been built, it's been land banked. Bid to build one in Surrey, one bid competitively, hasn't been built, it's been land banked. Built one in Brighton, okay. Started one in Middlesbrough, hasn't got very far, not bad. But either way, BedZ was zero energy developments. The Brighton one is code level 4 or code level 5, so it's actually less green than what we did the first time around. So we're replicating at a lower standard, and we're also land banking land for rich developers in the process. That doesn't seem to be the right thing. And also, my focus is on carbon and construction. And I'm fairly concerned that 15% of the global climate emissions are about bricks, concrete and steel. Another 20 or 30 about the stuff we buy. But the current debate is all about the energy we use. So the zero carbon homes is a great bit of capitalism promoted by construction companies. Like, we'll cut our waste on construction sites and we'll build zero carbon homes for you. We'll use more energy in the process, we'll discount the fact that we ourselves are the biggest users of concrete, steel, bricks, carpet. Carpet, 5 tonnes of carbon per tonne of carpet, resurfaced on average every 11 years in every home in the UK, because it's on average the same as when people move house. That's capitalism, that keeps going. You could look at natural capitalism, which is the idea that we can have green capitalism. That was invented in America. And one of the key advocates for that is a guy called Ray Anderson from a company called Interface Floor, which is the largest carpet manufacturer in the US. And what they proposed was that if you improve efficiency, you can go greener. And they did. They've moved from a very small percentage to something like nearly half, I think, or roughly half their carpet now is made of recycled old carpet. But recycled old carpet is not getting you towards sustainability, it's getting you towards increased efficiency, which has allowed them to have a greater market denomination and have grown things. And what Ray Anderson talks about is how we need to climb out sustainability and get there first. And as you get there, the oxygen gets weaker and you have to really make an effort and get there to the top. But I prefer an analogy which was from the Paralympics a couple of years ago, which was they all set off and one person was left on the starting line. And the disabled athletes looked around and they collectively went back to the starting line, joined hands and ran together. Because we don't win by a few capitalists succeeding to reduce their emissions in ways that allow us to increase ours, or reduce our emissions in a way that allows theirs to keep going on. Everyone needs to get to the finishing line together. So it's no very well trying to be mountaineers and be better than the other company and being greener than the other company. We all have to win together. And I think that's the real challenge that I would take. And for me, Bioregional should and hopefully will continue to focus on how we need to combine technology, capitalism, and behaviour change and economics together. And for me, it's about what Schumacher said, and it starts with education. It's about asking what we can do and accepting that the opportunities for change within capitalism restrict green action to technological change. And what happens to that in terms of, sorry, I've disrupted your display. In terms of where I work, which is waste, well, imagine a waste hierarchy. Reduce, reuse, recycle. That's now a legal priority law through the European Union. Energy recovery, disposal. Energy recovery is where economics happen. So as long as capitalism is responsible, they'll focus on ways to do energy recovery better. If you want to do demand reduction, you have to change capitalism, you have to get there. Likewise, within carbon, if you want to reduce carbon or energy efficiency, that requires behaviour change being leading technology, which means that activism needs to lead economics. It means social and environmental needs to lead economics rather than economics lead what we can do. Because otherwise what happens, if you invest more money, let's say, in low carbon technologies rather than carbon reduction, you produce more of something. I could describe my laptop as a low carbon technology because it uses less energy embodied and it uses less energy running than a desktop computer. But what's happened is as we've taken these on, we've got increased rates of built-in obsolescence, and the sheer numbers of these that we use goes up. So what happens in the end is you have something called the rebound effect, which is technology encourages economic growth rather than technology encouraging carbon. I'll just end with 2 examples. There is a localism bill proposed at the moment. That frames the new National Planning Policy Framework. That mentions a thing called REITs, R-E-I-T. I had to Google it to find out what the hell it was. It stands for Real Estate Investment Trusts. That's basically having collectively people have been lobbied, the rich people have lobbied for a new kind of capital gains tax which allows the rich people to invest on the stock market in a fund which then builds homes to be landlords, new private landlord class. Now, how does that relate to green capitalism? Well, if you Google the Institute for Sustainability, there's an organisation that says they're going to lead in retrofit in London and the South East and across the UK. Looked at their board. Their board has got 2 climate capitalists. It's got lots of engineers, some researchers, some people involved in the sustainable building industry for a long time who I respect. And then there was a lady. And this particular lady was strange in terms of her background. She was a member of something, I think it was something like the British Retail Property Forum, and what she'd done is been the lead lobbyist to get real estate investment trusts introduced via the Labour government. So it looks like what that is an exercise to get capital off the financial stock markets invested in retrofit. But if capital is invested from the stock markets, they want a rate of return which is better than what's normal. So it means on the hierarchy of what's good and green, that means it's actually worse than what's currently economically viable. So we're moving down the waste in the carbon hierarchy rather than up. So what that would mean is corporates retrofitting homes across the UK in the same way as they've done for the last 20 or 30 years. And it will be retrofitting to encourage economic growth to allow us to consume more. In the same way as since 1971 till today, we've been retrofitting. I read about the enveloping projects in the 1980s, which were included, I think, Sheffield as well as Birmingham and other places, and that was run by the Tories. And what that was done was to improve energy efficiency. It led to the concept of central heating. And we've done retrofitting, but it's led to an average of 7 degrees centigrade increase in the average temperature of the average room in every house across the whole of the UK. But it hasn't done one thing to reduce even 1% of the carbon emissions of any of those homes. So what we've done is used retrofit in the past as a way of increasing our consumer consumption in the home. And if you allow capitalists to lead retrofit, I understand that's what will happen again. So I would urge against mixing capital and green unless greens control the capital.
Can I just hand over the chair now to Teresa, who's been busy all day with SOC?
We had a very peaceful and uneventful session downstairs.
The women's movement often says that women have to work twice as hard to get to the top, and in Teresa's case, that's definitely been true.
I think one thing I want to say, I was in such a rush coming up that I've actually come without my phone, so